There is this cool quote by Osho. You can't sit with yourself for 5 minutes and you expect other people to sit with you, right? So boredom is the way to actually stimulate ideas in your brain. You're sitting alone with your thoughts. The more time you give to yourself, reflecting, the more time you can work on these thoughts, right?
Yeah, actually, when do you think? Do you only think when you do? Like, in fact, it's almost counterintuitive. Welcome everyone to another episode of The Overcorrection. We're back in studio with Ankush Datar. So he is one of the latest authors now from HarperCollins. The Health and Wealth Paradox is available.
You would have read a lot about dopamine, right? But it's very important to bifurcate cheap dopamine and expensive dopamine. Cheap dopamine is the problem. Scrolling on social media, pornography, having a lot of sugar. Sugar is one of the most addictive substances.
Yeah, it's been compared to like cocaine in terms of its dopamine spike-giving capabilities. I've heard a great place to start is by not taking your phone into the bathroom.
Let's not be too radical.
Okay.
What you should not do is wake up in the morning, first thing, and see your phone first thing in the morning. Waking up with an alarm is also bad. What's the reason?
Welcome everyone to another episode of The Overcorrection. We're back in studio with Ankush Datar.
Thank you.
So he is one of the latest authors now from HarperCollins. The Health and Wealth Paradox is available in Amazon, in bookstores, in airports. Ankush is on a whirlwind of signings and discussions that you're going on. How's that been?
If you're flying at an airport, I can guarantee you, instead of a Starbucks Frappuccino, this may be a better investment.
Yeah.
So give it a try. It's cheaper than the Frappuccino as well, and it's going to last you for a much longer time.
Excellent. So we're going to talk more about this book towards the second half of this episode. But first we have to get into our main topic of the day. So Ankush sent me this article, right? And I got an article from him. He was like, hey, check this out. And I was like, you know what? I'll just wait till he makes a video on it. And then I glanced at the title of this article, and it said, why you can scroll reels but can't read anymore. In brackets, you fucking idiot. I'm joking about the brackets part, but I certainly felt that when the irony hit me, and I thought that I should definitely read this article, and I did. And it was short enough that on my fourth attempt, I actually made my way through it. And quite insightful, man. Really dives deep into what we want to get into today, which is tech addiction. And while even though I was reading this on a phone, even reading something on a phone is not the tech addiction we're talking about. We're talking about reels, videos, podcasts, easy, quick dopamine listening things that seem to be consuming our entire day. So what's going on? Like, where did you first realize we're getting severely addicted to tech?
Let me give you the background of this entire article. It gives you a good background as to what is happening around the world, right? Not just with us. We know that reels are addictive. They kind of paralyze you. You're sleeping in the night. You can literally whiz from 9 to 11 just scrolling reels and kill that many hours of your sleep. In fact, the CEO of Netflix himself had said that Netflix's biggest competitor is sleep.
Yeah.
But anyways, moving away from that. So my dad had actually gifted me this very interesting book, Stop Reading the News. And this was much before the era of reels and shorts. This was maybe close to about 8 to 9 years ago. It's a very short book, Stop Reading the News by Rolf Dobelli. What is the indication of this book for today's time?
Okay.
So what the book essentially spoke about was that news and headlines are kind of structured in such a way to pique your interest. But what it actually also touched upon was that when you scroll through multiple pieces of information at a very fast pace, the neural circuits in your brain start to shrink. So the circuits that you essentially need for deep concentrated reading, they start to shrink.
They wither.
So the more you scroll on reels, the lesser time you can actually spend reading. So there's obviously there's a science behind all of the things we do throughout the day, and this is the key reason why you've lost your attention span. And the irony of this is that you come to my house, my dad is the most voracious reader I know. Every single room in my house would be having one cupboard filled with various kinds of books: history, chess, finance, politics, whatever it is. But today, if I ask him, can you read more than 5 to 6 pages in a single setting? He's like, no. So the irony is that he is the one who gifted me this book, but he himself has been consumed by the reels or the reels economy, or brain rot is what it's called today. That's the prevalent word.
Yeah, so like with brain rot, I think it's like a very interesting way in the different ways it can work, right? One, you have this shortening of your ability to pay attention to things, but there's also this other aspect which I wanted to get your take on, right? So before, when we used to do something, like say you go play a game of football, okay, or you go meet a friend. Now you've had this 1-2 hour interaction with either players on the field or with your friend, and then you leave that interaction. There's a process in the body that actually reflects on prior events. And that happens during periods of non-stimulation. Sitting in the car or in a cab without your headphones and just staring out of the window, reflecting on the game that just happened. Did you win? Did you lose? How did you feel about it? Hey, I just met this friend. What did we talk about? What was the connection I built? You know, there is a passive process, almost like muscles recover. There is a psychological process of recovery from stimulus that helps completely encapsulate that experience, you know, for you to get the full benefit of it. And now what happens is you're off the football pitch, and within 30 seconds, even as you're like stretching out and, you know, just packing your stuff up, you're already on your phone, you're on WhatsApp, you're on Reels. You're not getting any time to reflect on your life at all. And I think this comes from the other big point you touched upon, which is boredom.
There is this cool quote by Osho, very relevant to today. You can't sit with yourself for 5 minutes and you expect other people to sit with you, right? So, such a relevant quote, right? Just to everything you said today. And boredom, exactly. So, in today's day and age, boredom is actually a luxury. What do I mean by that? Let's say I'm bored now. I'm bored of this conversation. I'm not enjoying what we're currently talking about. I have the option of just picking up my phone, scrolling Instagram Reels. Boredom out. Anytime I'm getting annoyed with any situation, want to get out of it, right? Just scroll my phone, and the default setting is to kill off the boredom. In fact, there have been kind of very interesting studies also saying that boredom is the way to actually stimulate ideas in your brain, right? In a state of boredom, by boredom, what they mean is that you're sitting alone with your thoughts. The more time you give to yourself, reflecting on your thoughts, the more time you can work on these thoughts, right? The lesser time you spend with yourself on your own thoughts, right? The less you're going to actually be able to help yourself.
Yeah,
You know,
actually,
so-
when do you think? Do you only think when you do? Like, in fact, it's almost counterintuitive. If you ever want any time at all to think, to use your brain in a way that is not completely reactionary to some external stimulus, you must be devoid of that stimulus.
Exactly. So as you said, think and act. So in my profession, there's a very famous person, for the non-finance people who may not have heard his name, is Charlie Munger. I think everyone has heard about Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett. So Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett, what they say is that we have the luxury of thinking throughout the day, right? The acting part is just a very small fraction of all the thinking we've done. And how do you do that? Without any kind of distraction. But with multiple distractions for any small activity that we're doing, right? We're not getting enough time to think.
Yeah, and even within the world of Reels, say you love Reels, no one is denying that Reels are beneficial. Hey, I make a podcast, you know, so I do think there is value in tech. But the second you say there's a Reel that is of tremendous value to you and you found something great in it, when does the thinking on that Reel happen? While you're watching the next Reel? I doubt, because that next Reel is probably something else super interesting. But when is that information being processed? When is it being assimilated? And there are levels to understanding something, right? They talk about like the difference between knowledge and understanding, for example.
Exactly. And just look at the state of reels today. We started with 2 minutes. Now it's down to 1 minute. Now 90 seconds, 30 seconds. I personally cannot get through a 90-second reel. And it's not something, I'm not ashamed of it. It's just how it is. My brain circuitry has kind of adapted to the process of scrolling every single day.
Yeah.
From 30 seconds now, maybe 10 seconds is what it's going to come to. But there was a cool statement also that Tim Ferriss had said in one of his podcasts. He was talking to Cal Newport, who the person who wrote Deep Work, to get away from. So Cal Newport is the author of Deep Work, and he ironically now creates videos and social media content to tell you to get off social media, right? And so basically what Tim Ferriss touched upon a very important aspect at the time. He said the decay value of a podcast is much higher than you reading, right? So if you read, let's say I read the entire transcript of this podcast, then I just listen to the podcast. So I thought about it. What does that mean? He didn't actually explain it. Spend some time thinking about it. When you're reading, as you said, you have enough time to think, process and digest the information.
On top of that, like reading is actually a creative process. So you're listening to this podcast versus if you had to read this, you would have to visualize and imagine much more. My tone of voice, my inflection, what I may mean. So much of the work is being done that you have to do less work. It's much easier to listen than it is to read. And I think I read another study which actually quantified it. They just checked how much memory recall you have instantaneously after. Try to learn something by reading it versus by listening to it. It was like 10x. Huge difference. So
and the next step is writing. If you write it down, there's a bigger chance that you will recollect and process. But that's another step.
Yeah, that's a whole other step.
That's a whole other step.
So, people always wonder, like, where do you start? Like everyone accepts we're addicted to technology. There have been some good global developments. Australia passed the first law, I think, of any country to ban social media use for people under 16. Okay, this is, I've spoken to people in Australia, they're saying kids are still using it, but it's good that the government has sort of set in place a norm, an understanding. So I feel the generation that has gotten the worst of it is perhaps behind us because there was no knowledge for people who were, say, between the ages of 14 to 24 in the last 10 years.
But there is something else that this generation may be impacted by, if I may add on. Social media is one thing. Since we're talking about technology, let's move away from social media. Let's talk about AI. So AI has become, of course, there's no doubt, AI helps me a lot in my research, in my writing. A lot of my reading I do through links that I generate through AI. But AI does not think for you. It types for you. There's a big difference in that. What do I mean by that? Let's say these children now who are in the school. So I had written a piece actually that AI on what AI is going to do to writing and reading. So school children. Now, you're telling me that school children are not going to find shortcuts to finish their homework because some parent is saying you will learn more by reading. Come on. None of us were that wise at the time. And none of us will be that wise today also. If you give me a deadline of tomorrow, I don't have time to sit and absorb it. I'm going to use the shortcut, fast track process. So this is what's been happening with the few interactions I've had with a couple of parents. I don't know if I'm biased or not, but I feel this is a phenomenon also that can impact the learning process for the youth. Sure. That's how technology is impacting you.
I think when we were young, we started using Google to help us study. And to people that was, pure blasphemy, like, are you mad? Like, this is crazy. Go to the library. And like, are you mad? Why would I go to the library? It's in my house.
Exactly.
So, I don't think people should not use AI. Like, I think people should use everything. Why would you sit and just scour through something when you could get a targeted keyword search and hasten that process? But there are places where we're clearly losing out. We're talking about the withering of certain neural circuitries and stuff. So I always thought, like, when we talk about where to start, which is what I wanted to get in discussion with you, I've heard a great place to start is by not taking your phone into the bathroom. On top of the hygiene benefits you apparently get from this, which my wife keeps telling me about, just trying to take a shit without your phone, not one day, but say for a week or 2 weeks, will give in like at least 10 minutes a day where you are literally handicapped to reach out to anything. You don't have anything around you and you just go through that process. This might be a tremendously meditative experience for a lot of people. I've tried it.
Let's make it more realistic because very honestly, this is something that I also tried. And what I basically do is sometimes I take my notebook, my journal or whatever, just read through things to save time, because us corporate employees from morning to evening, we have to plan the day and we have to save the hours, the minutes. So that was, but again, I'm stimulating myself, right? It does not matter whether it's a notebook, it's much better than a phone. So
at least you have some sustained focus on a topic. Like, I used to read on the toilet growing up my whole life. And the nice thing about that compared to how I'm on my phone is that, look, I've at least committed to that book and that shit. It was like, there was something sacred about this book. And this is like, bro, I can start watching football videos. I can watch surfing videos. I can watch a finance podcast. I can text people. I'm just living my life on a toilet.
But what is worse? Okay, let's say you can't do this, right? You just cannot go to the washroom without your phone. Okay, fine, that's out. Let's not be too radical.
Okay.
What you should not do is wake up in the morning, first thing, and see your phone first thing in the morning. Probably waking up with an alarm is also bad. What's the reason? So your body naturally wakes up in the morning when cortisol starts, it's the stress hormone, right? When it starts to naturally rise, your body has this sleep-wake cycle, right? The circadian rhythm. You have a natural hour clock where your body decides to wake up at this time naturally, right? So now what happens is when you see your phone first thing in the morning, you're stimulating your body, right? So when you're stimulating your body, you are activating the sympathetic nervous system, right? Which is very ironic that it's called the sympathetic nervous system.
Makes you feel all nice and cuddly.
Because so that is the part of the nervous system which is called the fight or flight system. So sometimes, let's say you have an alarm and you just, wake up. Why does your body wake up? Because the sympathetic nervous system gets activated, right? And from prehistoric times, right?
It might as well be the sound of a bear coming to kill you.
From prehistoric times, our body was wired in such a way that this part of the nervous system was used only for situations of danger or situations of, great panic. You're not supposed to wake up with
that's why it's so easy to snooze also, because it's like you wake up, oh, there's no bear. Go back to sleep.
So what's happening is you're raising your heart rate, you're raising your level of stress. Easy ways can be just keep your phone away for 10 minutes when you wake up. You can probably kind of temper any kind of, I'm not saying it's the cure to your anxiety or stress, but over a 100-day, 150-day period, I think this can be a very easy way to start. The second is the opposite. Before you sleep in the night. So something that we can maybe talk about, blue light. Right before sleeping, do you see your phone?
I don't see my phone, but you know what I do? I do listen. So I got around this whole blue light thing like a genius. And I was like, dude, I'm not going to look at any screens. But will I listen? Yeah. And the same problem, I don't have that downtime. So I'm not looking at screens. I've set my alarms for the next day. I still use them. I will try to put the alarm off and then that's it. Then I don't look at it. I'm not confident. Like if I have a strict schedule, I have to get up. But I tried this thing where I won't look at my screen, but I'm still like it's playing on the side and my eyes are closed. So I'm literally falling asleep too. And when, I'll probably be asleep and then the last 10 minutes of that podcast will play and it'll go off on its own. And so blue light is not the only problem there, is it?
Yeah. So stimulation again. That's technology. Whatever way you need technology to put you to sleep, that's what's causing you to be addicted. Blue light again is a low-hanging fruit in my opinion.
Okay.
Reason why I say in my opinion is that over the years there has been conflicting research saying that yes, blue light does impact your sleep, but also people say that it's far-fetched, like it does not impact. But what I've seen personally, I can talk with my own personal observations combined with whatever research that I read. So what I observed with this is that my eye strain used to reduce when I was at the laptop till 8, 9, just before sleeping. And because my eye strain reduced, my sleep started to get better. So
And you tracked it?
Yeah, I tracked it. I
Alright.
wrote also about it.
When
as I
Ankush
always
says
do.
his sleep started to get better, he doesn't mean he like felt it and all. It means like graphs have like said his sleep got better.
And there's always an article for everything that I talk about. It's so simple. People just observe what you do in the day and write about it, document it. Once you observe it, you can work on those things.
Yeah, measurement is the first step to progress.
Yeah.
I think.
And blue light, there is this, I don't know whether it's upcoming research, but there is research to show that blue light also impacts the dopamine receptors in some way. Basically, your natural secretion of dopamine can get affected. So let's actually talk about what types of dopamine are there and how technology is kind of impacting us with these types of dopamine.
So is this related to Dopamine Nation?
Yes.
Yes. That's what I thought. That's where I thought you're going. Great. So do you want to just lay the groundwork for this book? Because you reference that book a lot, especially in the dopamine part of your chapter. So let's get into it.
So it's to keep it very simple. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter in the body that basically dictates all the motivation you have for any activity you do or any of the actions you do throughout the day. It's regulated by your need for dopamine for the activity. So there are basically two types of dopamine. So you would have heard a lot on podcasts or you would have read a lot about dopamine, right? But it's very important to bifurcate cheap dopamine and expensive dopamine. So dopamine is not the problem. Cheap dopamine is the problem. Why is it called cheap dopamine and what are the activities under the cheap header? Scrolling on social media, like we talk about. Pornography, smoking, drinking, having a lot of sugar. For the people who are surprised, sugar is one of the most addictive substances.
Yeah, it's been compared to like cocaine in terms of its dopamine spike giving capabilities.
Sugar has 55% on the dopamine scale and cocaine is like 150% as the book.
But it's still on like the same scale.
It's still on the same scale. So what does cheap dopamine do? Cheap means very easy to access, very easy to get. So the easier it is to do these things, right? The more you want of it. So let's say, for example, you start smoking cigarettes. Straightforward. Why do people get addicted to nicotine? When you smoke, of course, the body releases dopamine and this cheap dopamine, right? So cheap dopamine is the dopamine that gets stimulated and needs to be replenished much faster. And you need more of it the next time. So how do smokers get more addicted? They start smoking and eventually from 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, they move to a pack. And then they can't do without it because every time they smoke, the baseline level of dopamine they need is constantly increasing.
Yeah, it's the law of diminishing returns, quite simply put. And this is what I want to get into. There are expensive dopamines which don't follow that law exactly.
Exactly. So now we spoke about cheap dopamine and we know why we're addicted to these habits, even though we know they're bad for us. Unfortunately, our brain has become wired in such a way that we are addicted, right? So how do you break out of these cheap dopaminergic activities? Now coming to the expensive dopamine activities. Working out, investing long term, right?
With Ankush.
Reading, writing, studying, going for a cold shower,
Maybe going for a long walk
Going for a long walk.
without, with your own thoughts.
Going for a run.
Meditating.
Having the difficult talk with your partner. How many people do that? That actually is so.
My God, sorry, I have to jump in. Ankush one time put out a post on his Twitter, which I'm going to try to recall it, which said, anxiety is created by the time taken between thought and action.
Yes.
Did I get that correct?
Exactly.
And I love that because I realized when I wanted to do something, I knew I needed to do it. That was a great feeling. Then every second that passed that I didn't do it was a compoundingly more and more awful feeling. And I was like, oh, that's all the anxiety was. It is me knowing that I had to do something. Otherwise, there's no anxiety. If you don't know you have to do some shit for yourself, you're not stressed about it.
Exactly. And that's such a powerful quote. If you internalize that quote, you can get rid of a lot of your anxiety. Of course, I'm not talking about clinical anxiety for the people who have it and are listening to this and who may be diagnosed with it. Right? Now, getting back to the expensive dopamine part. So why is it called expensive dopamine? Expensive things are hard to get, right? So something like working out, it's not easy to do. But when you do it, you feel amazing, right? But still, every single time you have to do that workout, you're like, man, I don't want to do this workout. But after you do it, you feel good for a very extended period of time.
And I would add to that, you feel more good after your second workout than you did after your first workout.
Yes.
The opposite of cheap dopamine.
Exactly.
Because you get better at it. You don't really get better at smoking cigarettes.
And expensive dopamine is more long lasting. So like I said, cheap dopamine needs to be replenished faster, like scrolling on your phone, right? But something like reading, talking about, coming back to the first part of our conversation, reading, once you've done with a session of reading, you're more fulfilled, right? That's how it releases expensive dopamine, makes you feel better and more fulfilled for longer, but it's tougher to do. That's why it's expensive. So the brain is actually like a seesaw, as Dr. Lemke says in her book. So we have to tip the balance. It's not like you have to just be a stoic and only go for expensive dopamine. You have to balance it out enough such that you're not too addicted to the cheap dopamine side, because that's probably going to lead to ruin over the long term.
Yeah. And being too much of a stoic is going to make you boring.
Yeah.
I mean, not that way, but yes, that's why it's a seesaw.
No, I agree with the boring part.
I don't want to make too much light of the boring part. I don't actually believe in this idea that you have to drink to be fun, or you have to do all this stupid bad shit for you. But what I do believe is in the not being afraid of it. Or even the guy who's so obsessed with his fitness, he's scared of having a burger, because he loses 6-pack for 1 second the next morning. That also feels a little I don't think that is a super healthy thing either.
It's more about a sense of self-security, which is really missing in the world today. Because of social media, I think you're looking at a lot of people around you achieving certain things. So people's self-esteem is low. So just like you said, that alcohol is bad for you. Let's not kid ourselves.
Yeah.
No amount of alcohol is good. I know it. No, sugary items are not good for me. I know it. But I have introspected. I have done my own blood test. I know where I stand. I know exactly how healthy I am. Yeah. And I know I can afford to do these things, right?
Exactly. People do, you said it because that is how people say it, not good for you. What does not good for you even mean? Okay, it's not good for my blood report the next morning. Yes, but if I'm a perfectly balanced guy, it's good for me. It's my life, bro. It's you want me to not enjoy a food I want to enjoy because it's not good for some blood test I may take the next day. That seems crazy. So good for you is a much more holistic question and reserves a more holistic response as well.
There's a social angle to it also. You're sitting with your friends or you're sitting with your partner after a week and just having a nice meal. You all know you're not looking for the health aspect of it, just the
And this may be a psychological healthy aspect of it.
Exactly.
Right? I'm not always looking at the six-pack aspect of it.
There are no studies to prove it, unfortunately, as people want a study for every single thing. Come on.
I mean, this is obvious. So coming back to like the use of your phone now, like a lot of people think they can't handle their job. You know, if you ask people why can't you put your phone away, it's usually work. You have a very rigorous corporate job. Right, you are able to put your phone off at 9 p.m.
I have that app which I showed you.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that app.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Because people can maybe take away some productive tools from this episode. I have this app called the Minimalist app. So one of the more important things that I want to tell the listener also is that I'm not some master who's mastered the art of keeping my phone away, right? I'm as addicted as everyone. So that's why I need the app, right? So the app is the Minimalist app, which is, I think I paid like $2.99 for a year. It basically makes my entire page layout as boring as it is. I have to actually type out the name of the app every time I want to go to it. And most importantly, I can block the app and there's no cheating. Like for example, if you have your app on a regular phone, you can block and unblock. The option of unblock is not there in this. So as we are speaking right now, my Instagram has been blocked till like 4 p.m. from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. because I don't have any need to look at it, right?
And if you really need to for work or whatever, you can log into your computer, take the effort of remembering your password.
Make the process more difficult for yourself. Like you said, the browser part, it's a little annoying, going on your browser, logging in. So try to find these apps. But then again comes the paradox of productivity apps. So this is a productivity app. But the funny part is that every year, because end of the day, it's a business, right? Every year, every productivity app that comes out tells you that your productivity app is not productive enough. So technology is trying to just sell you more and more and more. So I mean, end of the day, you have to make processes by yourself, like wearables, fitness wearables, a great breakthrough in technology.
Yeah.
But what are these wearables trying to tell you? To do the basics.
Yeah.
They're just telling you, do this, do that, sleep on time, go for a walk. I mean, there's nothing radical that the technology is doing for you. It's just reminding you that you need to get back on track. Like, as ironic as this sounds, I write so many reviews on the Ultra Human Ring, which are great. These are great tools to help you. The CGM, which we've spoken about countless times on podcasts, smartwatches. But now if you see, I'm not wearing any wearables because I know I've spent enough time learning about the data. And what I've realized is the data is making me do the basics.
Yeah, and it's also, once you've got that down, if you're not in some extreme state, it's just one more app that's going to pop a notification on your phone telling you that, your heart rate was so much today. Good job. Tomorrow get some more active. I was like, just chill. Like, isn't it the irony, right? Like, this productivity app is telling you what a good day you had, but that ting sets off your sympathetic nervous system.
Just chill got us back to the conversation we were having.
Yeah, like what happened to listening to music? Right?
You can backlink that amazing reel.
Yeah, when Ankush and I met, we used to just like sit in a room and listen to like Pink Floyd.
What happened to those days? Now I need...
now
okay, I'm listening to Pink Floyd. Okay, so what mellow activity am I doing that I need Pink Floyd in the background? So if I'm working out, I need Metallica, whatever way. When was the last time you met somebody and just listened to music without using music as a tool to do something? Again,
yeah, I mean, now songs are getting famous through reels. I think that's like the biggest way to kind of say, like, the best way to market your song is that it'll become a popular reel audio.
Podcasts are being used to fill in the gaps during your day. Although it's a great breakthrough that people can consume knowledge on the move. But if you need that podcast for that half an hour
Yeah.
walk,
Because it's not even become consumption of knowledge anymore. It's just become alleviating boredom. I think
Exactly.
when we just come down to it, it's like, why are you listening to this? Did you crave this information right now? Is this what you wanted to know about? Like you looked up today, let's watch a podcast on tech addiction. Did you do that, or was it just there on your screen?
and happens to me a lot. Let me not say like I'm some person who's mastered the art of staying away from podcasts. Sometimes when I go for like a half an hour walk, I've often thought, like, what am I doing? Half an hour I'm just wasting. I could have been listening to some podcast about the markets or the economy, learned that much more because someone else is learning more than me. I often go through this, but you have to go through the phase of, listening to those internal thoughts. That's the only way of...
I think that's it. This Dr. K, I think we've spoken about him before. He's this psychiatrist based out of the United States. And he's done a lot of work in Eastern medicine and then Western psychiatry. He says today, when you want to start getting into this counts as some type of meditative process, what we're talking about, which is essentially listening to your own internal mind rather than the external world. Different forms of meditation in that way, but today a very effective form of meditation is just sit and stare at a wall for an hour. What do you think would happen? 1 hour just staring at a wall. What do you think? How do you think your reaction is going to be? But man, you got to be strict with it. You can't just say, okay, can it, I'm not doing it. You sit. Apparently people break down in tears.
Like Vipassana, when people do
Vipassana, everyone cries apparently, but just 1 hour at a wall.
You're facing your internal demons and there's no getting away from your internal demons. You have to face them. So that is what's...
The fact that we've not faced them for so long, I personally am terrible at this, right? So I can speak from personal experience that, hey, I know that I don't spend enough time with my internal voice. And I think when you set it off with that Osho quote, it's still ringing in my head. I was like...
Naval also says, which I used to think that, again, it's him being a little extra preachy. But what he also mentioned a long time ago of his meditation practice. So usually meditation is, of course, I'm not demeaning meditation because I myself do it in the morning. I wake up in the morning and I try to meditate for about 10-15 minutes. And what I've observed is that the thoughts are flowing, right? And I have to stop paying attention to them. Just pay attention to my breath. But I'm doing the activity of breathing. What Naval said is that meditation is just sitting. You're just with yourself. Here you're using the breath as... It is a great way to get away from technology and everything. But I think the latter process which Naval kind of tries to preach...
It's more realistic in today's day and age. I mean, you could basically ask someone to just have no technology in their car rides.
I can't move around in my car without music or a podcast. Very honestly, I can't drive. Driving for half an hour without music or a podcast, I would want to kill somebody.
Anyways, on the road, people are on edge. You're like, bro, I just have to pay attention to you assholes all day.
Yeah. But it's important to know that I know that I need this, right? Internalize with this. Don't fool yourself.
So if you don't want to start with the toilet, Ankush has vetoed that as an option. Where do we start in people's day-to-day lives? Because I think that is one good option. If it's not the toilet, where next? Where would you say?
Morning, when you wake up, right?
Just phone away.
Phone away. You don't have to see what someone else is doing in the first 10 minutes of your day, because you're going to wake up, you are going to watch Instagram, you are going to see those 100 stories, and I'm also guilty of that. Yeah. I'm not being all preachy and all.
But actually, you should actually be going and saying good morning to your family and talking to people.
I wake up at 5 a.m. before anyone wakes up. My morning is the most sacred time. So maybe if the people say 5 a.m. is the golden hour, and there's nothing golden about it. It's just that no one is awake. No friends to call you, message you. No work to actually disturb you at the time. So maybe try to wake up in the morning.
Maybe that's why. Maybe it's not about the lighting. You know how they say silence is golden?
Yeah.
Maybe it's like, that's why 5 a.m. is such a good hour.
And that's how it becomes a virtuous cycle. So when you start to wake up early in the morning, how do you consistently do it? The only way you can do it is sleep on time. How do you sleep on time? By avoiding scrolling on Netflix for longer, right?
Yeah, a lot of people think it's like waking up in the morning. No, but it's actually some other things you can do in the day, that it's not just the time that you woke up that will determine when you go to sleep.
It becomes a virtuous cycle. And the other things that you can do, of course, get that blocker. For somebody who just can't do the things that we have spoken about, get that blocker. I assure you, for the first 3 days of you using the blocker, you're going to think you're in rehab. And in case you think you're that way, you're not mad. It's just you are addicted, and you will realize how addicted you are.
But when you wear that blocker, what, you can't see a screen?
You can see a screen, but when you click on the app, it's blocked for 12 hours, and there's no unblock option.
Oh, you mean sorry, I thought you were talking about the red light blockers.
No. That's the next step. That's optional.
That's optional.
Because it's quite expensive also. So not many people will be able to take that. So these are the two things, I think, very simple. Start with this.
Morning routine, night routine.
And it becomes a virtuous cycle. When you start doing this, you start feeling good. What more can I do to feel better?
And like we said, this is on a broader scale, day-wise expensive dopamine. You don't also have to look at dopamine as what does dopamine do over a 1 hour period. You can look at it, what it does over a 12-hour period, over a 36-hour period. And this type of dopamine will compound. So your 5th day doing it will be better than your first day doing it. Exactly the opposite of your 5th cigarette being a lot worse and less fulfilling than your first cigarette.
Connecting back to the start of the podcast to this, how my dad ended up now scrolling reels and now he's consciously kind of getting away from it by force reading. Now, don't get yourself in that kind of
and with reading, like, I mean, I fortunately had the habit as a kid, lost it in the middle. When the boom of tech was there, I only realized today why I lost it, because I really wondered, like, why would I just stop reading one day? I used to read like 6 books a week. Like, my squash bag had like a kappa for books. I'm like, why would I just stop? Like, that seems so crazy, because I was addicted, like toilet, dinner table, everywhere. And it's because the smartphone came. It's probably started with like BBM. Like that was the first time like my phone had some social element, people's statuses, there were groups and all that shit. So I was like, I guess that was when I was like in a cab back from football practice. That was probably the first time I was like, I had like a book there, but then I had a BlackBerry. And some chick has put up a status and I have to go see her new display picture. I don't know what.
And you have to decipher what that status means.
Is she talking about me?
She's not. No one is... One thumb rule of social media, no one is thinking about you as much as you think they are thinking about you.
Perfect. This is what we want to talk about. Because, one thing I love about Ankush's writing. Firstly, this book is well written and simply written. Okay, it is written not for people who have a deep understanding of finance like he does, or a deep understanding of fitness like he does. It is written for people who maybe know a bit of one and can extrapolate that knowledge to both and learn a lot. The other thing I really liked about Ankush is he talks about the creativity process a lot in his background writing. I am someone who is a writer as well. I've been working in like from advertising to fiction content, that's sort of my day job. And I'm fascinated by creativity as an form of expression. So people are very shy. People are scared what other people are going to think. And to some extent I say, yeah, man, you should put a lot of thought into what you write. Don't just put garbage out there, because you're putting it out there for people to judge. That being said, I've also read one thing where it's like, man, if you're not somewhat embarrassed by something you've put out there, then it's not authentic. To the extent, and what I mean by that is it should be so real that you should feel almost vulnerable to that. And I feel you talk about the process of putting yourself out there creatively in a very productive and encouraging way. So how did you feel any doubts before you started putting yourself out there publicly the first time, like back to your first article?
Yes. Still, whenever someone speaks about the book, I get crazy imposter syndrome, right? Because when you're writing about a new concept, right, something which has never been written about before, your first thought will be, I'm mad. Like, I'm mental, no one has written about this, so what am I writing, like, what the hell? There have been so many prolific writers who have come before me. Why have they not thought about it? I'm still like, it's going to take me time to kind of grasp that concept, that feeling over the next 4-5 months of imposter syndrome. But
that's very interesting. But I actually, there's a quote by Steve Jobs, and apply it to whatever scale you want to apply it to. I think it's still relevant. But the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the only ones who can.
And I don't think about changing the world. Think about the relevance of your idea. You like the idea and you feel you like the idea so much. One is that you don't want validation for the idea. You just, maybe you have the thought that this idea, if I put it out, it'll help somebody, right?
Yeah.
That's basically it. If you are chasing validation for any idea, there's a high chance you're going to get disappointed. And unfortunately, that's what social media makes us do.
Also, you are not the idea, right? Like this whole concept of health and wealth paradox, you have beautifully captured some parallels in the substructures of these two things, but they exist on their own. You have not, not to like doubt it, you've not like invented something about health or invented something about wealth. You've given people a framework. So how you said like, hey, this is the idea, I'm putting it out there. And,
absolutely.
I just want to talk about the book a little bit. When I've looked up the health and wealth paradox before, this is what it was. And this book, I think, is a solution to that paradox, more than laying it out. The paradox of health and wealth is that people sacrifice their health to chase wealth in the first half of their life, and then end up spending their wealth to regain their health in the second part of their life. We see this all around us, especially in privileged societies. In the first world, though, this is a huge problem. It's super reached India. Like it is here so prevalently that it is kind of awful, because actually compared to the West, Indian privileged class does not have a lot of sport and activity. So we've got a lot of the money and the Coldplay concerts and stuff and Bastion type restaurants, but we don't have like extremely competitive sporting environments, which is one thing that I think the West does really well to balance it out. So this book is about how you don't need to make that sacrifice. Okay. And you can have them both. In fact, maybe you can only have them both. The other thing I've been reading about is, hey man, like internal wealth is more important than external wealth. It must be.
It's easy to preach that, right? But even if you think about it very commonsensically, if you try to become a healthier person, right, you will become more productive in your work, and your productivity may possibly lead to more wealth creation. I'm saying may or will, because just like this book says, it doesn't promise you anything, right? But it increases your probability of being wealthier,
yes.
Right? And wealth is very relative. Wealth and as the book says, wealth is dependent on money, right? But it's not the same thing.
The same way
health is dependent on fitness, but it's not the same thing, right? And the paradox is, as you rightly said, and thank you for that, so I don't have to clarify it at all. That's literally the paradox that the book is trying to bridge. And so people in the early stages they had the question as to how is it a paradox, right? And I had to explain it. So I was happy that you yourself got the understanding without.
We see it, and I always look, maybe you'll say, oh, Rohan, you're arguing on the side of health over wealth. I was like, whatever, like I've just seen so much, like, wealth is relative, but to some extent health is not as relative as wealth.
Yeah.
Do you get what I'm saying? In the sense that I've seen, man, when you have back pain, you have back pain. You can't downsize your life. You like, if getting out of bed in the morning hurts, like if you are not so wealthy, you can get a cheaper apartment, move to a cheaper city. What life are you going to downsize? Like, what are you going to do? You're just going to lie there all day and not move your back? That's going to make your back. I mean, that's what I mean. That health is a bit more, the band you're playing with is much smaller, man. So when the band is smaller, a fluctuation in that is percentage-wise way bigger.
And no one wants back pain. No one wants to be overweight, right? No one wants these things. They happen. But if you have the first principles, as the book says, you can buy the book to know more what the first principles are, then you may not necessarily...
And so, on that note, I really wanted to say what I love about this book is it kind of breaks certain stereotypical notions that people have, right? So, say you're rich and you're not happy with your health. A typical idea would be to say that, man, my skill set was being like a shrewd businessman and, I'm good at that type of things, but I'm never going to be the guy who's fit, healthy, lean, whatever you want. My skills are here. But this book counters that very notion because it shows you very directly the same principles you applied to get rich. Hey, you can apply them to get fit. Okay, and that to me, it's like that nerds versus jocks, right? I mean, the age-old argument. And here, if you're a jock, really disciplined with your diet, you know how to train your body, you know how to track your progressive overload.
Andrew Huberman.
Yeah, exactly. You can become really smart in a financial way as well using those same principles. And I think that is so encouraging. We can close on nerds versus jocks. I mean, this book, I think... the nerd
Topic
and jock
for the
paradox
next
could have
episode.
been, the nerd and jock paradox, right?
Yeah.
I mean, to put it down into...
Someone had actually said this on LinkedIn as well.
Yeah, because I
posted
think...
this.
I think both of us are people who have a big interest in health and fitness, even aesthetics and like stereotypical like jockey type stuff, but we also love to read. And I'm sure in your life you've experienced people like, oh, tu padhta bhi hai kya? Like,
it's the Indian mentality.
Yeah.
It's very, very naive. Very naive.
Yeah. And let's take that from the West, guys, because in US colleges, while they have complete pieces of shit there, they have these type of, I met this one guy, he was just like 6'4", blonde, blue eyes, football player, right, at my college. And I just had he had like a ridiculous name like Johnny Bravo or something like that. And at one point he was just chilling in our common room and he broke out a saxophone and just started playing like Thelonious Monk and stuff like that. And I was like, what are you, dude? Because in my head, I was like, oh, if you've been born and raised like that, you're not going to be cultured enough to like learn jazz or classical music. And that was a very stereotypical thing that I sort of had in my head from watching like American Pie movies, I guess. But yeah, so this book is, I'd say, an interesting answer to that as well, which is a bit of a social tinge on it. But really, man, when you said the poster was cool, you weren't kidding around. I love it. Who designed that?
They did.
They did?
They did.
Great
It was
job.
cool, very cool idea.
Amazing. So, yeah, guys, to wrap it up, the Health and Wealth Paradox is out for sale now. Get it. I think next time we should get Mihir with you.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
That'll be fun.
You'll get to know
Yeah.
how similar the processes that we used are, and
I know. I mean, the part about how y'all got together, I was like, wait, Mihir wrote that, and I love in the book how he's actually shared WhatsApp like screenshots of how organically this process developed. So good luck with the book. We're going to put a link to the Amazon in the description. Follow Ankush on his Twitter, on his Substack. He's the holistic investor. Get jacked, stay rich. Okay, we're out.